I am back with another episode after a while. I'm here with my husband this time, and we thought of recording an episode about our relationship and how we met because we think it can be useful for someone. First of all, to share that magic is real and also that relationships are hard. and we didn't hear many stories similar to ours, and so if there is someone out there that is in a similar situation and is confused, not that we have all the answers, but we are figuring it out as we go, but I think it can be helpful to know that you're not alone. Anything you want to add?
Hello.
Okay, so I think I can start. So I'll start talking about how we met. And it was a couple of months after I moved back from London to Italy. And one of the reasons why I moved back was because not just I changed career and I didn't have an office then anymore. I was quite flexible where I could work, but also I also broke up with the partner I was with at the time. And so there were really no reason to stay in London for me anymore. And after 8 years, I think I experienced everything that I needed in the city. So I moved back to Italy and I had a plan. I said I'm going to stay with my parents for a while and then traveling maybe, I don't know, to Bali or other place in the world because I'm free to do that now. And I remember that after all these journey that I was on, self-development, spiritual journey, it was mainly during the pandemic. So I actually didn't see anyone in person with the same interest on the same path as me. And so I remember when I was at home with my parents, which was quite hard also because I was completely independent in London, very free to do whatever I wanted. Going back home, living with my parents was very difficult. So I didn't have anything planned for that summer. It was the summer of 2022. And I decided that I wanted to go to some festival or have some experience in person where, we could do group meditations or yoga or anything related to self-development and spirituality. And I remember after that decision, probably a day or two after that, I listened to a podcast where Mattias De Stefano was in, which is, I would call him a spiritual teacher, I would say, that I follow. And he was speaking in a podcast, and they mentioned in that podcast about a festival that was going to be in America that summer called Arcadia. And, it was exactly what I was looking for. Matthias was going to be there, so I always wanted to see him in person. That was perfect for me. And there were many other speakers that I knew also that were going to go and speak there. Also, I love dancing, so the fact that it was a music festival also was very attracting to me, and I really thought it could be also nice to have some fun and not just do deep healing work. And initially, the festival was supposed to be at the beautiful town of Alpine in Wyoming. And I really felt as soon as I heard them talking about it that I really wanted to go. So I checked how to apply because there was an application form with some questions and I wasn't sure if they were going to accept me. But a couple of days later, they approved my application so I could go, and I was very excited. I really felt it was going to be a big thing for me. But I checked the price of the flights, trying to understand the accommodation. It was basically impossible for me because it was short time to organize everything, to afford the flight and the entrance for the tickets and the accommodation. So I decided to wait and maybe go another time or go to another festival closer, I don't know, to Europe. And then a few weeks later, Aubrey Marcos, the person that was organizing the festival, sent an email saying that it was going to have a Zoom call live with, more info about the festival. And at that point, I already decided that I was not going to go, but I said, let's see what he has to say. So I logged into the call, and they announced that the festival was basically you pay whatever you can for the entrance. And I really felt that was a sign for me that I could go. So I contacted a few people that I met on the call, and to share accommodation. And so I bought the tickets, the flights, the same night. and then a few days later, they said that they needed to move the festival from Wyoming to Las Vegas, which is very different vibe. And my flights were already bought to go to Wyoming. So I was very, very disappointed and sad and said, oh, maybe it wasn't a sign. Maybe I'm not supposed to go. And so I was really upset and also a bit shocked. And there were many people shocked about that, but they shared, we had an app where everyone was sharing their thoughts, all the people that were going to the festival, and I really saw people reacting, even if shocked, in a very good way. So they were saying basically that the location doesn't really matter, right? It's the people and the intention. And the intention of the festival was actually to create a more beautiful world. And that was really important to me. So I decided to move my flight to Vegas with a very small fee. So that was also another miracle. And I was very excited to go. But at that point, because things were constantly changing, I was also scared that, maybe something else would have happened closer to the event that would have prevented me to actually go there. So what I did was I have an oracle deck, and I decided to pull a card asking, what to expect at the festival. And the card that I pulled was expect miracles. So it was a really good sign for me. And I decided to post it in the app where all the other people that were going could read it as well. And at that point, my now husband started to message me.
You want to read what I wrote to you?
You want to read it?
Sure. I wrote, hey, you seem like a beautiful, energetic person that keeps popping up everywhere. She had posted a few other times in the app, and I remember seeing and commenting on at least one. So I wanted to connect to see if we could meet up when we went to Arcadia. Also, I'm super interested in Reiki, tarot, astrology, all the stuff that I dismissed my whole life. You seem like you're in that space. Do you do remote Reiki? Do you do tarot or astrology readings?
Yeah. And so after that message, we started to chat. We exchanged numbers, and we started to talk basically every day about spirituality and other things. And
do you want to share anything about your relationship that you got out of, like the timing of that and kind of how that ended? And then I can bring us up to speed on like how I got up to this point too.
Sure. 6 months prior, I would say, I broke up with my previous partner. We were together for 3 years and a half. We were living together at that point. And during the pandemic, I went through this awakening, which my podcast is about that, what we call spiritual awakening. And I mention it in my story as well. So I won't repeat too much. But I was in this self-development healing journey, and he wasn't going in that direction. He wasn't interested, and we stayed together as long as we could, but at some point we really saw that we were going to different directions, and so we broke up. And but we kept in touch for a while, and after a few months that we broke up, he messaged me that he had a awakening experience, I would say. And I was really sad because that was, at least from my point of view, the main reason why we broke up. And so there was some grief of, everything that it could have been in that relationship. So I was really still grieving about that. I wasn't ready at all for a new relationship. I was really focusing on myself, building my coaching business, and settling back in Italy. That was my main focus. And I really also wanted to go to this festival with no expectation in that sense. I really wasn't interested in relationships at that point. And I said, even if I won't have any partner anymore in my life, I will be okay. I was really done.
And he was similar to how I was, like more scientific, skeptical, like you were talking about magic and these other things. And he thought you were a bit
crazy.
And then you want to talk about the reading you got?
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me all of this. So I had a reading before booking the tickets to go to the festival. I was working with a mentor. She is a medium, and she was basically giving me some advice. And she said that, because I asked, so I'm not interested in relationships right now. It's something that I should completely let go. It's not something for me. I need some guidance regarding this area of my life. And she said, no, there is definitely someone for you that is going through a very similar journey right now, but it's not the time yet. And this was about 2 months before the festival. It's not the right time now, but yeah, there is definitely someone for you, something like that.
Yeah, and you have a recording of this, so we'll play this here.
You're not going to be by yourself for the rest of your life. I promise you that. What's coming through is your higher self is laughing like, no, Valentina, you're not going to die alone in your Italian village by yourself. Like, that's not happening. Yes, you are absolutely going to find love again. And it's going to be a love that really appreciates you and every aspect of you, and someone that wants to grow with you, and someone that's like very much on the same page and on the same level, and like encourages your spiritual growth, encourages your growth in all aspects and all areas of your life. It's just coming through as like, don't make that a priority right now. Just kind of like put that on the back burner for a little while and just kind of focus on everything else that we talked about. But yeah, that's 100% in your future. Nothing for you to worry about there. There's absolutely something that's coming through is like, this person that you're going to be with, he's also going through a similar chapter right now in terms of like his own heartbreak, his own spiritual exploration, his own independence. And it's like the two of you are then, I have chills as I'm saying this, the two of you are then going to come together and be like, oh my God, I thought I was going to end up alone. You're going to be like, I thought I was going to end up alone too. Now can be alone together and just be with one another. So just know that you're both going through your own processes right now. And that's going to be a really, just a really beautiful thing that bonds the two of you together in a very, very solid way. So.
And so that corresponds to my story, which I'll bring everyone up to speed with my story. So at the time, I'm a dentist, and I had finished up doing some loan repayment in upstate New York, and didn't really know where we wanted to end up. I was married, and so we decided we had actually this kind of crazy idea a couple of years prior to just full-time RV for a bit, and before we ended up buying a house. And it was a weird idea, but probably some, in some aspect me like delaying this next step in my life. And so we ended up crazily doing it. I took some time off from my job, and had an infant and a 5-year-old, I think. And so we were in an RV for several months, kind of just traveling over the U.S. And my marriage had always been difficult. We had things from our childhood and from the religion that we were raised in that just made things difficult. So it wasn't until finally kind of being put together in confined space and really had us face these things, and everything fell apart. And I didn't know much about psychology, nothing about spirituality. I'd left Mormonism years ago and was quite skeptical, materialist, scientific, very, very skeptical of, what I'd term as pseudoscience and woo stuff. And so that all kind of hit the fan and was ending at the same time that your relationship was ending.
Yeah.
And so this was December of 2021.
Yeah.
And so, we were on the road, and I was between jobs, living in an RV. We had decided on coming to Oregon, so I just came up to Oregon and was trying to finding a place, finding a job, working through this divorce, and had just started trying to piece together, understand what had happened in my marriage, because it wasn't just communication. I went down this rabbit hole of psychology and started this Awakening Through Psychology podcast. And then we cover this in another episode, but I was not familiar with any of this stuff. Started having really peak states, essentially psychedelic experiences, but I wasn't doing any, substances. I was just really broken, open, and kind of extreme, psychological, distress, facing all these uncertainties, my whole, essentially an ego death of job and, where I was living, and my whole identity as a husband and father. And so I started having, essentially these kind of bliss states, a lot of synchronicities. I didn't know what synchronicities were. I started, researching lucid dreaming, and just had these bizarre experiences that really broke my view of reality. And luckily I had a friend that I was sharing these things with, and he was like, "Oh, you need to look up Kundalini awakening," and because I'd had this feeling kind of going up and down as people talk about in a Kundalini awakening. And so, this was this kind of time in my life where I was really much more extroverted and posting on this Fit for Service app, which, funny, it was just a few months that I was on there and present, just long enough to meet you. And the way I found out about Arcadia, I didn't know anything about Aubrey Marcus. A friend had sent me a podcast because she liked Zach Bush, and she actually didn't know really anything about Aubrey Marcus, but she sent me this podcast with Aubrey Marcus interviewing Zach Bush. And it was funny, the night before I was talking to my friend that had kind of guided me. He was familiar with psychedelics and spirituality, and so he was a good guide over this several month Kundalini awakening. It was the night before. I remember talking to him on the phone late, and I said, I think I need to go to a festival, because he goes to Burning Man every year, and I had never been to anything like that. And sure enough, the next day is when this friend sent me this podcast, and I started listening to it. And in the podcast, they talk about Arcadia, and which was created as a festival to create a more beautiful world, kind of this world that we know is possible, and we can unite and create. And so, as soon as I heard it, I figured, this is I guess this is the festival to go to. And then it was just a few weeks after that we started chatting on the forum.
Yeah, we started to talk every day, pretty much. You weren't sleeping much back then, so...
Yeah, I mean, this was the kind of deepest bizarre part of my Kundalini awakening, where some nights I was only sleeping 2 or 3 nights. I felt perfectly rested.
2-3 hours.
2-3 nights, 2-3 hours, and oddly enough, felt perfectly rested the next day, and no bags under my eyes or anything. And so, Yeah, so it worked out because there were a lot of times at 3 a.m. that we were talking
Yeah.
on WhatsApp.
Perfect for our time zone difference.
Yeah, and this was, if anybody's gone, there's spiritual awakenings, and they can happen more gradually.
Like mine.
Yeah, over like years or over like a whole lifetime. And then there are very abrupt and often more chaotic spiritual awakenings. Like Kundalini awakenings are generally more significant and condensed and have physical manifestations. And they can be really, really ungrounding. And so, yeah, there were a lot of times, at night I was 3 a.m. in the morning walking around bare feet, just trying to like ground and figure out what the hell was going on in life and reality, and all these things that I just were breaking my view of reality. So in many ways I was like your ex, but I was forced to confront, the things that I thought that I knew, but I really didn't. So you were a really, really grounding force for me that I don't know where I would be if I hadn't had you and my mom and my friend. You all sort of took turns helping me process and ground, and so I'm very grateful for you all.
Thank you. Well, when we started to talk about spirituality and what you went through and what I went through, and you said about Kundalini awakenings, I met someone else that went through it when she was very young. She did the same Reiki course that I did in London, and so I was very interested. So initially, I was even just very interested in understanding more of what you were feeling or what you were going through, and help in the way I could. But yeah, I think because I knew, probably I didn't get scared, or I was just very curious and fascinated by your story. And so things got intense even just before the festival, right? We started to message.
Yeah, so for me, I had started experiencing these, what you would call like bliss states, things that I'd never experienced before. It was for me, it started in conjunction with really opening up to this therapist that I had at the time. And I just felt so much love and I think similar to like what people describe, MDMA or that type of heart opening experience. And I just remember the first time it happened, and just feeling blissful and just so, it's like a nirvana type feeling. And that had happened like a month or two before and kind of disappeared a bit. And I remember really early on in us talking, I kind of wanted to open that back up again. And I had been meeting with a coach and talked to her about this. And we just had a really beautiful session where, we really just kind of shared love for each other as, coach and coachy. And it really like just put me right back in that place and opened up this, love for everybody, which was where I started, as an early child, and then just had shut that down due to trauma and stuff. So it was interesting because it was a couple days after that, I think, that we had just started messaging, and I was still in this space, and then talking to you, it was kind of contagious in that you want to describe, I guess, how you felt.
Yeah, even if sometimes I wasn't even understanding what you were talking about, I started to feel like so elevated, such a, like the feeling of being in love. That was the closest I could, it's exactly that feeling. But the weird thing was that I didn't associate it to you. I was really happy. You know, when you are in love, you love everything. You love what you do, you love the people there around you. Even if there are difficult things, you just overcome them much more easily. I was in Sardinia, an Italian island at that point, so I really thought maybe it's just because I'm in this beautiful place, because I do the job that I love. Initially, I didn't connect it to you, but then little by little I understood that it was because of you, because we were connected and you shared what you were feeling, and so it was exactly what I was feeling.
And it's funny because as we talked in, the next year or two, you talked more about how this is what falling in love feels like for you, and you first felt that, as a young teen.
Yeah.
But I actually had never, that wasn't what falling in love was like for me. I had never experienced it that way. So these were new experiences, a new feeling for me. And it was also funny because for me, a lot of this awakening was just being really vulnerable and expressing just, my true nature of like being just loving people. And I had always felt like I had this fear, this trauma of being misinterpreted. And, in high school I had been labeled a flirt, even though that's not, I had never tried to manipulate or anything. I just really loved connecting with people and sharing just love and friendliness. And so there'd been a few experiences in life where people had interpreted it the wrong way. And so I had learned that I just really gotten wounded about like, I need to make sure this girl doesn't think that I'm like coming on to her or romantic or anything. So I'd really shut that down. And I remember talking to you about this kind of predicament, and you had said, "Oh well, and that's okay in Italian because we have these two words for love, right?"
Yes.
What were it? Ti voglio bene.
Ti voglio bene, yeah. Ti voglio bene and ti amo. Ti voglio bene is we say to family members, to friends, to show affection to them. It doesn't mean we are in love with them. But ti amo is more really, I love you, I'm in love with you, and is usually for a partner. So yeah, we have this distinction in Italy, but there is not the same in English.
Yeah, it's not. And that's what I needed is I felt this love for people, but I couldn't tell. I felt like I couldn't tell people like I love you because they would take it the wrong way and be a creep. And so I remember like this felt like this like ability to like tell you that I loved you, but not have it mean. So this was really like a platonic love, which is not usually when people talk about platonic love, it's like, oh, it's not romantic. Really, like platonic love refers to like the perfect form of love, meaning like the most perfect type of love, and kind of encompasses romantic and all these friendship and whatnot. So that's really what it felt like to me, is just this unconditional love. And I remember at some point, I forget what happened, but you eventually realized that it ended up being more than Ti voglio bene, and there was romantic love in there too.
Yeah, I think you started to say, actually, I don't mean ti voglio bene anymore. I mean, I love you, ti amo. So this after a few days that we started to talk, I think a week or 10 days or something. It shifted quite quickly.
Yeah, and for me, like being in these states, there were times when like everything seemed so clear. You just kind of see the potential of what's possible. And I think it can trip you up because, whether it's these awakenings or synchronicities or people's plant medicine journeys or whatnot, you can grasp these other timelines that, when you're in these higher states of consciousness, but then really just think that really get stuck to it and not adjust it. And so, yeah, but for some reason, it just, everything made sense to me that, like, of course we would work out. And I like very soon on, I was just convinced that I was going to marry you and you were my soulmate. And you were just curious about this all and like, okay, well, let's see what happens. But it really was, for me, like, I describe it as falling in love backwards, in that I knew that it was going to work out. And then I got to actually know you, who you were. And I had to figure out how to put that together in the 3D world to get to what I knew was supposed to happen.
Yeah, like we felt this unconditional love that at the beginning I didn't even understand it was for you as well. And without even knowing each other. And then, with time we got to know each other more and more. But the connection was immediate. And that was the first time for me, for sure. And then, while we were texting, I started to ask you a few questions. Because months prior, I wrote down all the characteristics of the man I wanted. One day, if and when I was ready again to enter in a relationship, because after all the relationship I've been in, I was very sure what I wanted this time. So in the world of manifestation, they say, write specific things about what you want, be very specific. And so even as a game, I did it. And I remember I also put down the height of my ideal man, and I remember I messaged you, how tall are you? And you said, I don't know in feet.
6'2".
And then I translated it in meters, and it was 1 meter and 87 centimeters, exactly how I wrote in my journal. So that to me was really shocking. And then I also wrote down, like, I want someone that is connected to music in some ways, and I was sure it was not. It was a dentist, why it should be connected to music, but then actually you sing.
Yeah, and I did musicals, and I had started up doing some singing again, because that was a way of kind of connecting with emotions. Yeah, so you had written like 187 centimeters or taller.
Yeah.
And I remember when I messaged back and you just kind of lost it.
I lost it. I said, this is not possible. Like exactly the height that I wrote down. That was crazy. And other things, like I wrote down someone that was good with technology, and it could help me with my computer issues and stuff, even if I'm not too bad, but I still need help in that area. And I thought, surely doesn't have this because he's a dentist, or maybe he's not passionate about that, but actually
my minor was in computer science, so I've always been techie. And you also wrote somebody that spoke English. You failed to specify not from living in America.
yeah you see, I should have been more specific. But I was someone that speaks English. And I also, I didn't write it down, but I really don't care about cars. But the only car I cared about, I said, one day I will buy a Tesla. And you had a Tesla.
Yeah, that was part of my mid-divorce crisis. I was like, I'm going to buy what I've always wanted.
Yeah. So there were all this weird stuff that it matched basically everything that I wrote down in my journal. Not everything. There was also, you can speak Italian, so that wasn't but the majority of the things were there, so I was quite shocked. I was still, listen, I'm really not ready for a relationship, and I really wasn't. I'm really grateful for this connection, but I'm not looking for anyone at this point. And I think you were super okay with that, because after 12 years of marriage, you were just experimenting. And
and Mormonism is very like focused on marriage. You date, as soon as you kiss, you like define the relationship and you're exclusive, and then you just keep dating that person until you either like have a traumatic breakup or you get married. So it's not the most ideal situation, I think, because you have very high stakes of like, I got to make it work with this person, because if I don't, I'm going to be alone. And I didn't realize that like that's not how everybody else in the world dates. And so, yeah, I was not ready to, be just tied down and like in another exclusive relationship. And so I was on board for just being in the moment and what felt right.
Yeah. And another thing, sorry, I forgot. My lucky number, and the number that I always see and I see everywhere usually is number 22. And I asked your birthday.
It's the 22nd of October.
I lost it again.
And then tell about your friend, your colleague years ago.
Yeah, this was years ago. Yeah, it's not that meaningful for me, probably.
It's bizarre to me.
Yeah. But anyway, I had a friend, a colleague in London. She definitely had some channeling skills or mediumship skills. And one night we were at a dinner at a...
This was before you were like had gone through your...
Yeah, years ago. Yeah. Like now it would be probably 6 or 7 years ago. So, or maybe less. But anyway, 5 years ago, let's say. And she looked into my eyes while we were in a restaurant without me asking her anything. And she said, the partner that you're with right now is not the partner that is going to last. And you will find your husband at 35. Like that. Without me asking anything. And I was quite shocked and also pissed off because I didn't ask that information. And also she said, you're going to get married at 37. I said, okay, thanks, whatever. I really didn't believe. She shocked me, but I wasn't really believing in what she was going to say. And this is exactly what happened, though. I met you at 35 and I married you at 37. Yeah, so it's quite weird, that too. Yeah. So, well, we met at the festival. Do you want to say something?
No.
Okay. We met at the festival and... I really wasn't too open for anything happening with anyone. I just wanted to enjoy my festival, listen to the music, listen to the speakers, meeting new people, of course. That's also why I went there, to meet like-minded people. But then we met, and because you were a dentist, and a few years prior, just at the beginning of the pandemic, I chipped my front teeth. Mm-hmm. And I was still quite worried about them because I didn't know if they were okay or not. So I asked him to check them during the festival. So I remember you checking my teeth with your iPhone on a bench at the festival. And I found it so cute. I was really grateful for you because you also, you were saying, oh, they're perfect, don't worry, it's all okay. If something happens, you can always fix it. So I was feeling so much better and I wasn't worried that much. I felt so much gratitude for you. And I said, okay, maybe, if he wants a kiss, I can give him a kiss. And then we started to walk and a few minutes later we kissed. But we were still, not exclusive at all. Like we were.
Yeah, although I was a bit sticky and I was following you around like a puppy dog.
Aww.
and you, that's not what you were looking for at the festival.
So the last day, I think it was, we had a mini fight. The
second last day.
Yeah. So we spent together the first couple of days and then it was the time of my life when I just needed freedom. I met other people, I wanted to stay with these people, so we went to different directions. You experience your stuff with your friends and I experience my stuff with my friends.
Yeah, then we came together on that last day, and I left at a good place.
We decided to keep talking, and stay in touch. And then we went back home and we both got COVID. And then I think is then when we, started to intensify the communication, and we kept each other company because I was in bed, sick, and you were too, not sleeping at night also. So we were always at the phone together.
Yeah, and I remember us, talking really openly about, what are we? I think neither of us, but particularly you, weren't, still weren't looking for an exclusive relationship, especially not with somebody in another continent. And so, it was a good kind of exercise of not being controlled or guided by like fear of abandonment in a relationship, or feeling like we own each other. There was somebody that I'd met at Arcadia that was coming through Portland. They were RVing, and I remember, letting you know that she was going to come through, and I was going to meet up with her, and we weren't exclusive. And so you were, it was a really refreshing discussion where you're like, hey, this is what I would be okay with you doing, and this is what I, wouldn't be. I would be hurt even though we weren't like exclusive. So instead of, threatening the other person or telling them they can't do it, it's like, hey, this is where my boundaries are, and you can do whatever you want. I'm not trying to control you, but this is where I'm at, and what my needs are, and how you can meet them. And then, yeah, for me, I remember that being very impressive and like healing to see you really giving me trust and autonomy. And then, it was shortly after that I think we decided that we wanted to be partners, be exclusive.
Yeah. And there was the question, how do we meet again?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew already I wanted to go and visit some of the friends that I met at Arcadia in November. They were in Colorado, so I remember telling them, I might come to visit in November. And so I thought, well, since I'm going already to Colorado, I can just stay a couple of weeks more and come to visit you in Portland, in Oregon. But it was a long time since November. It was August when we were talking about these things. So I remember we manifested to meet before. And we said, we should find somehow a way to meet in September. You told me about the conference that you had.
Yeah, it's funny. So Arcadia happened in July, and this was August, I guess, that we were talking. And I was going through a difficult divorce, and wasn't free to like travel and have expenses that weren't really justifiable. And so I didn't know how it would work. But then I went to work one day, and I was at a place where I was treating TMJ disorder, kind of learning from a mentor. And I just went to work one day, and he's like, hey, you don't want to go to a conference in Amsterdam, do you? I was by another dentist that lived in Portland that was, well versed in this, and he happened to be going to Amsterdam for a few-day conference. And so it was perfect because I needed to go to the conference, and then that was direct flight there, and it was easy flight for you from Italy.
Yeah, and so we managed to meet there. But I think in between we had also the astrology readings, right?
Yeah, and then I think it was before that trip that I got an astrology reading, I think sometime after Arcadia, from an astrologer that you had recommended, which was really amazing for me. Especially when you're like going through an awakening, Kundalini awakening, when you have, all these synchronicities, kind of energy flowing. It's really bizarre getting readings because they're much more powerful. Doesn't necessarily mean they're true, because some of it pulls in like your dreams and your fears and stuff that the psychic or whatever you're seeing is reading. But so I got an astrology reading, and I think a month or so later you ended up getting one, and so you were having a little bit of I was fully on board with things and knew what was going to happen. I was just thinking like, oh yeah, in a few months we can get married and this and that. You were more cautious and grounded and still open to see where things would go. But I remember you had these doubts, but at the same time, there were all these really bizarre synchronicities and signs that like you were kind of skeptical and you wanted signs, but then you would get these signs and then you're like, but I don't feel like I'm supposed to feel something. I'm supposed to feel a certain way, and then I know it's right. And so I remember you were going to get a reading from the same person, but you wanted to you didn't want to feed them any information. And so you made sure not to mention anything about like meeting a partner. And because you wanted to see like what they could read from the universe. And then we can play a clip of that reading here.
Can I ask you something else? So my South Node in Libra is also relationships, right? Is it something that my soul decided not to experience in this lifetime, or there is space for
There's definitely
romantic
space. There's definitely space, because your moon, which is the other vital part of who you are, is in your 7th house of love and relationships.
Okay.
So there, even though you have learned lessons, but you are supposed to have a very interdependent relationship where you both bring equal parts into the relationship. Someone who allows you to be the fire goddess that you're supposed to be with your North Node in Aries. So there is room for it, and there is a need for it, and you can learn a lot about yourself and feel comforted through relationships. So I wouldn't say that you're not supposed to have that. You're fully allowed.
Okay, thanks, because it really didn't go well so far. So I was wondering if it's something that I really should forget or...
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, have you met someone like within the last couple of months that might be very significant in some way? Because you're having a very, you're having like a once in a lifetime love progression. I'll show you what this looks like. But your progressed moon that takes 28 years to cross a circle, to cross the zodiac, has met the moon. And when that happens, it usually indicates like you meet like your spouse, or you meet like a very important life partner. Okay, what's going on? Tell me the details. This has happened.
Yes,
okay.
I did. And I
Okay.
wasn't focusing on that, but it lives over there, and to me is a problem.
So Venus and the moon are conjunct, and 2 months ago, it would have kind of like initiated this process of like
2 months ago is crazy. Because
it
it's
is really
exactly when I
crazy.
met him. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see like July or like even June, they would have been within like a 2-degree orb, which is really tight for the moon to be like that close to Venus. Interesting that you did have this moon Venus transit in your 12th house, which usually kind of delivers things unexpectedly. And when the moon and Venus meet, it doesn't happen that often. Like I think it usually takes about 28 years for that cycle.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
So this was the reading.
So it's a transit, right?
It's a transit, yeah.
Instead of your natal chart or when you're born, it's like, okay, because you were born at that time in that place, like this is when these planets and
align.
suns align and line up with certain things happening.
And I'll give another detail for who is into astrology. You might find it interesting. And I also asked about my South Node in Libra, and Gabe sun sign and moon sign and are in Libra too. And I remember I noticed that, and it was an interesting combination. So I asked if there was any significance to that. And she said that we had a past life connection, usually when it's like that, which is what you also said. You felt we met before.
Yeah, and I remember at Arcadia, somebody had mentioned Sirius or something. And like I knew nothing. I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose when you first start considering all these things that you may have dismissed before. So somebody was talking about Sirius and Pleiades and these like starseed things about, this idea that there's these consciousnesses that come from other planets that have, are further along in oneness or whatever, and they choose to come to Earth to help Earth along or anything. So I didn't know much about this, but I was curious about it. And this person, I think, had already also mentioned Akashic Records, which is just this kind of reading from the Akasha, which is kind of this library of all timelines and all information, where you can have somebody do a reading, and it's sort of like a psychic reading. I mean, it doesn't, it's very careful to not take away your free will. It's like, this is just what could happen if, this is the trajectory you're heading on right now. And yeah, so I remember I was curious about this, and I had just gotten on Instagram. I didn't know like who to look for to get it. And then somebody had just added me out of the blue, and I saw that she read Akashic Records. And so I like reached out to her, and I remember she didn't really remember why she added me. Vale was a little skeptical. She's like, it's just a scammer, or it's just somebody that's trying to get followers or something, which I don't know what happened, but it was this architect in South America that also just started, took a course reading Akashic Records and was good at channeling. And so I got a reading from her, and yeah, it was just this like really beautiful. I remember when I read it to Vale, we were both cried. Yeah, we were both crying. But yeah, do you want to read what?
Well, I can give a summary.
Sure.
Maybe. Yeah, basically in the
reading,
they said that we were soulmates, that we have been together for eons, and we, went through a lot of challenges together, and that we were souls that decided to reincarnate together because our love is so great, and we could not live apart. So to me was very meaningful. Yeah, I was still skeptical a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that was difficult, and I think a lot of people can struggle with in this space, is like the meaning of synchronicities, or
signs,
religious signs, spiritual experiences. And coming from my dad, from a religious perspective, would always see this deep meaning in things that were a little bit stretches. And the problem I think that you can get into is like if you take everything literally, and like this is from God, or this is the destiny or the fate, you can get really stuck, not readjusting. And so for me, I had to realize that conceptualize synchronicities, or which is basically like when the physical world lines up with things that are mental in your mind. You're thinking about something and all of a sudden you see it. You're thinking about somebody and all of a sudden they call you. So there were a lot of these happening, and on the lowest level, I just had to decide, these don't mean I have to go in this direction, or this is right, or that this person means this, or I have to take this job or whatnot. It's kind of just meaning that you're present enough that you see these connections that are always there. And it's just a sign that the reality works differently than you thought, that there's a connection between your inner world and your outer world. And sometimes that's all it means, is just kind of an Easter egg that is just cluing you into the nature of the reality, that doesn't mean that you need to marry that person, or that's the path. because if you think that, and I think we can kind of have this small self view that, I'm going to get a sign from the universe of what's the right way for me, what's the wrong way for me. It's also true that like you are the universe, and so sometimes you're going to kind of manifest into existence signs of what you want, or fears of like, oh no, this isn't right because this happened. And that happened a bit. I think, there was a time when you were doubting things and you had pulled a oracle card and it said like no, and you're like, well, what does this mean? And I was like, well, maybe it's just a representation of like some fear, some subconscious fear, or like maybe it's just what needs to happen at that time to slow things down. Yeah. It's not a final answer. It's just a step along the way to get you to the final destination. So you hold it kind of lightly.
I think, this is a bit of a tangent anyway, but what I understood with all these readings and things is really they don't predict the future. It's not 100% sure that what they tell you is going to happen. Is more than whatever they tell you, how do you feel about what they tell you, basically? Are you happy about that or you're scared about that? And I think that makes you realize what you really want and what you really desire. And so if it's something that you didn't want, what you receive, you can always change, I think, direction. This is how I interpret these things.
Yeah, and there were like a bunch of synchronicities along the way. After Arcadia, I had stayed in a Airbnb with a bunch of people, and then Vale had become friends with a group of people. They didn't meet at Arcadia, but then all of a sudden, a couple months later, you sent me this picture on Instagram of those two friend groups like becoming BFFs and are still connected today, where people have even moved to be around each other. At another festival, they just happened to camp next to each other, and then they've been inseparable since. So it was just bizarre things that happened.
That was really crazy. My friends, they didn't meet your friends at Arcadia, but they met at another festival. They became best friends, and
Yeah, and then the next year when we went to Arcadia,
we were
both
all
of
together.
our friends groups were
so crazy.
together.
Yeah. But yeah, I was really scared, even when we decided to be, partners, because I never thought of moving to America. Visit America, yes, sure. Working for American companies, yes, I done that, but I never thought I would move to America, and especially on the West Coast, it's even further away from Italy. And so I was so scared that I was constantly asking for signs. Every couple of actually every month probably, I was asking signs to the universe to tell me if this was the direction to go. And the universe always responded. Like a couple of days after I was asking, please send me a sign that this is still the direction that I need to go, something was happening. Another thing that happened, for example, is the mentor that I mentioned at the beginning, that she was saying, there is someone for you, but it's not the right time now. He's going through the same process that you're going through, discovering himself, awakening spiritually and stuff. She posted on Instagram, a picture of herself with something written that was, this is your sign to move to the city, state, or country that is calling you. And she actually was in Oregon. She was writing from Oregon, saying that Oregon is the best decision that she has ever made. And I was so shocked because I asked the sign to the universe. A couple of days later, I see this post. It's about moving to another country or state or whatever that is calling me. And there was Oregon as well in the post. So I messaged her And I said, oh my God, I feel this message is really for me. And she replied that she felt that the message was actually for me. She didn't specify it in the post. But I took a screenshot of that conversation because I also sent it to you because it was surreal. And shall I say also the other medium? Yeah. And another sign, it was basically constant signs. Instagram is again a good place for me to get signs, but I remember asking a sign from the universe, and I logged in on Instagram. There was an Instagram live of this English medium that was doing free readings, and when I joined the live, it was already reading for someone else. And after a couple of minutes, I didn't ask any question. I was just listening to what he was saying. And he said, I see a man with 2 kids with a problem with his ex. And then he says just, America is a good idea for you. I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, I took it as a sign. And again, I asked him sign again a few weeks later. And Matthias De Stefano, which is also the guy that I was listening to the podcast about Arcadia, again, he showed up in Portland, Oregon, randomly the day after I asked the sign again. So all these kind of things, kept me going in this direction.
Yeah, but there were also like I said before, there are also things that sometimes would go in the opposite direction too. Like you had that reading that one time when we were pretty far along, and I was I think a year later. Yeah, and it was, she said like, no, this isn't right or something, and I remember that shook you up, and you're like what do you think this means? And I said, no, this could be her stuff, which is something that you always have to account for, is that the person channeling, reading, whatever, they've got their own ego and their own stuff, filters, biases. You've got your own fears that you're projecting into the world too, that like your worst fear is going to happen. And so and sometimes the direction that the universe needs you to go in is not the one that is pleasant or the one that you want to go in. It's the one that you need to learn some tough lesson. And so it says, this marriage or this relationship, this is right for you because you haven't worked through this stuff, and this is what's going to work through it. And so I think I just said, I think this is just, this is a fear of yours, and it's showing up, and it's kind of bringing it into the spotlight. But ultimately, there's kind of a victim or like a passenger versus like the creator mindset, where if you think you're not a creator and you don't control your destiny, it's like, well, the universe says I should do this or it says I shouldn't do this, and you're kind of just along for the ride. So there is some role that you have to do where you're like, okay, well, what brings me happiness, what works? Is this a fear of mine? Am I operating out of fear, or am I operating out of love?
And that's what I did after the reading. I think it was very useful for me because I realized what I really wanted. I said, well, if I wasn't afraid, what would I do? And it was, moving to America and stay with you.
Yeah. And there was, as we got further along and, the divorce finished up, we got engaged. It was interesting, I started really kind of high in this awakening and love bombing and like always a little bit clingy and needy. And then as like my life stabilized a bit, I think we both recognized that like there was an aspect of me that was kind of dissociating and holding on to this like other reality, this future, this dream, to cope with, to get me through, a very difficult time in my life, which isn't, coping, some dissociation. Like, these aren't necessarily unhealthy things as long as they're grounded and they're working for your good and everybody's good. And so there was kind of a period where life started to get better for me, and then the relationship got a little more real and normal, and that was a bit tough for you because you're like, hey, you're not messaging me all the time, and I was back to like normal sleeping. And then we had to like also fall in love as two flawed
Humans.
people that have our own faults, and it's not just fairy tales all the time. So we'd got engaged, and the things, we got into a bit of a dynamic at one time where I think things, you were kind of reckoning with the fact that we had decided to elope, just go somewhere that would be kind of a destination wedding, but just us. And it was tough for you because you had already had these ideas of all your life of what the perfect marriage and whatnot would be. And I think that was hard for you. And then you noticed some kind of reticence in me. I think you had come for a visit, then you had gone home, and we weren't connecting as much. And so we got into a bit of like a pursuer chase and one being chased role, where I think you were a little afraid of losing me, and that kind of made me back off a bit or be a little more distant. And so but then we recognized that. I remember you talked about how you recognized that, and got things in balance again, not operating out of fear, which was the key. I remember around that time, having some cold feet or fears, and then just kind of having an experience where I realized, like, no, I remember what we shared, and we do have the exact same vision. And so it doesn't matter what comes up, like, we'll always be able to like reconnect and calibrate back to like that shared vision, our shared belief. And so it was like I need to like jump in and go forward. And then it was a little tricky because a couple weeks later, I think things got tough again for me. And then kind of the message for me, as I pondered on it, and was, like, actually, maybe I need to love Vale enough that I want what's happy for her. If she's not happy with me, like, maybe I just need to let go. Which was really confusing because they're like two opposite messages. But I think I had to confront kind of fears in both directions. Fears of like getting stuck and then in a marriage, and then fears of abandonment. I had to confront those because otherwise they would control me. And once I did, things fell into place. So sometimes I think we get messages one way, and then we get a message the opposite way, and it's easy for us to think like, oh, well, that first message was wrong or whatnot. But I think it's really important just to be in the moment and like follow what direction you need to go in, because I think in some ways the universe or a higher self is looking down on us in this maze, and it knows where we need to go, and sometimes we need to go left, and then after the next corner we need to go to the opposite direction. And it may seem counterintuitive to us that's on 3 dimensions, where it's seeing in kind of a 4-dimensional view, but yeah, it
hasn't been easy.
Yeah, I think the one, in terms of, it's interesting because in some ways, like, there were things that lined up that were so, like, couldn't be more perfect. The things magical that we wanted. Yeah, it was magical. And then on the other hand, there were things that were almost comically lined up that, like, we triggered each other in ways that we were very similar to our exes or multiple exes, where they, we kind of had the same wounds and the same tendencies. And so some of those, I think, caused us to doubt, because we're like, wait, if this is right, like, why is this person doing the same thing my
Yeah,
my ex did?
exactly. That was very confusing. And honestly, there are no many manual about these things. There is not much guidance out there about this stuff, and how to decide when to be with someone or when to leave someone and things like that. So we really had to figure it out ourselves, little by little. And I also realized that what we were triggering each other with, and so the possibility of healing, weren't just our traumas in this life, but I really felt were intergenerational. Like, for example, you mentioned about the wedding, how I took the fact that maybe the best thing for us was elope somewhere in the world without inviting anyone. That for me was very hard at the beginning to hear, because I had another idea in my head of how a wedding should be. And then I stopped and I thought about that, and I realized I actually don't mind that it's just the two of us in a paradise like Costa Rica. It seems like also easy and stress-free, and it's just because everyone around me had a different wedding. Society usually wants you to organize a different type of wedding. Of course, expectation from parents and all these kind of things. So I realized it wasn't actually my desire, the wedding that I had in mind, but it's just what I saw and what, kind of the indication, the preferences that maybe my parents had. So I really realized that it wasn't the problems that we had, it wasn't just for us, but they were coming down, our culture, maybe religious trauma, family stuff as well.
Yeah. And I think the reason why in many ways like we bring up these triggers and these wounds in the past, and even though that's kind of confusing, because you think, oh, if this is the right person, as though that there is some like destiny that the universe has, as though it's a game, rather than we know that we're here to heal things and to progress. And so there's a reason why we attracted or manifested the partners that we did in the past, that where things didn't work out. There's a reason why there are certain things that they triggered in us, wounds, from childhood or past life, or however you want to conceptualize it. And there's this principle of as without, so within, as above, so below, that like your outside world reflects your inner world, your inner reality. And so if we're kind of stuck in this idea that it's a objective kind of mechanical world where my life is this way because I don't have money, or because this happened to me, and if I could just change this, or if I was born in different circumstances, everything would be perfect. We can do that with relationships too, where like, oh yeah, I have this relationship or this marriage that failed, or didn't work out, and I can somehow just jump ahead to having the perfect partner as though it was your ex that was the problem, rather than kind of this puzzle piece of like they had something that triggered you, and there was an opportunity for both of you to heal. That's what I've realized with us, is that we triggering each other in these ways, but much less severe than what we've experienced in the past. Like it brings up the same response, because that response needs to be activated to heal it, and it gives us the opportunity to have a pattern activated, and then ask. The reason why these responses are maladaptive is because the situation we're in right now isn't the same thing that created this pattern. So that's where we like ask, okay, well, I see my partner is doing this, and this always happened to me in the past, but you're like, is it really the same, or or actually maybe it's different and I'm just kind of replaying something from my past. So it really is, it's painful, but it gives us this opportunity to really heal these things rather than just put a Band-Aid over it and then just try to pretend like we've healed it, because it'll pop up in work, in family relationships, with friendships, if it's not healed.
Yeah. And this was another belief that I had, that if there was the right partner, the one to marry, it would be easy and perfect. That was one of the beliefs that I had. And so that's also why I was so confused. So why there are all these triggers, and why there are triggers similar to the previous partners that it didn't work out. And so it was very confusing. And what I realized is, the difference between a relationship that can last, a relationship that is dysfunctional and is better to end, is that not that in one there are triggers and the other one there aren't, but is in both cases there are issues sometimes and triggers that come up. But in the healthy relationship, the one that it can last longer, is that both partners are willing to do the work to overcome whatever is coming up and try to come together and find a solution, instead of blaming the other partner because everything is going wrong, and don't take responsibility for what you are doing also. So that is what I realized.
Yeah, and another thing that, there are some insights that I had as I processed my marriage that I really my previous marriage that I really put to the test with this. One of them was, I just need to be authentic and not try to hide things or play games or whatnot, because I feel like when there's two partners that spend 50% of their energy hiding these parts of themselves that these are things they think or habits they have that they are ashamed of. They hide from the other person to try to be somebody else, try to keep that away from them so they're not abandoned. They'll work on that on their own time. You spend 50% of your energy doing that, and then the other 50% of your energy trying to figure out what the other person is hiding so that you really know who that person is. You waste your energy rather than just saying, hey, this is me. These are parts of me that I'm working on. This is who I want to be. And regardless of whether your partner knows them or not, they're you, and the person you want to be with is somebody that accepts you and accepts all of you, so that you don't have some day in the future that they find something out about you, or see this other side of you when kind of the honeymoon wears off, and then they're like, wait a second, I didn't know this was you. And so instead of just kicking the can down the road and I'm gonna fix these parts of me and I need to hide them so that Vale stays with me, I just said, if this is the right person, then they're gonna work with me. That doesn't mean hey, this is me, you accept me, I'm never gonna change it. But hey, this is what I want to be, but I'm not always there. So that was really important. And then also,
That was good, baby. I liked it.
Thanks. And then also this idea that a marriage, it's a little microcosm of the universe, which is this idea that everything's one, but it's also all these individual parts. And so in a marriage, we have to half identify with who we are as the individual, and yet the other half needs to identify with this union of the two partners, so that you're not just yourself and you're going to take care of your needs, and then if there's enough left over, you take care of the other person's needs, and you look out for yourself and they look out for themselves, because it really is an organism. There is an organism that is both of your minds and both of your souls. And so that means that if you really become one, you're not going to do anything that, you're not going to want to do something that hurts the other person because you identify with the union. So that's hurting you because you've become one with this person. And that means it's kind of like two cells in a body. Like they both need to look out for themselves, but they also need to identify with the body and recognize that there are some times that as the body, this cell A needs to like sacrifice a bit, or needs to bear some of the burden, or to hurt some, or to kind of slow down so that cell B can catch up, or it's not always even, or and that's happened with us, is that for me, this has been the healthiest relationship that I've had, and it's been difficult at times, but it's hopeful for me because it's so much healthier than ones in the past. Whereas for you, this has been hard, and sometimes you're like, hey, my previous relationships weren't this hard. And I've recognized that like you've slowed down and you've stepped back a little bit to pull me up, to kind of pull me out of hell. And that's love, and that's sacrifice, and it requires trust from you that like, hey, I'm gonna help him because I trust that who he wants to be and how he wants to heal, and I'm not just going to look out for myself, but I love this person because they're also me, and they share the same goal in the end, vision.
Yeah.
And they're owning their stuff and not trying to project it onto me. I think that's the key, is you have to have the same vision.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do the work. Yeah.
That's another thing that I never realized. While maybe with other partners there were less triggers, or it was easier in a way, I never had the same vision. With you, that's what I had. And also you take responsibility for your things to heal, and that was a good sign. And even with all the doubts and fears that I had, what kept me going was, other than the signs, was, really asking myself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And the answer was, I want to be with him. So I kept going in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's like two people can be very close to each other, but they're going to different points on the horizon. So It seems like, oh, this works good. We're really close to each other. But as you go on, you realize that you're going different places. Whereas you and I, like, we're actually started very far apart. Like, we were very different in some ways.
Yeah. Kind of polar opposites in a sense. Yeah.
But we're looking at the same point on the horizon.
Yeah.
And we're both doggedly committed to getting there. With or without the other person. Like, we know that's where we want to be, and that's sometimes like what gets us through, is that we have the same vision.
Yeah.
And even though it's hard and sometimes we're far apart, we're going to the same place. So I'm not gonna jump ship to somewhere else. You're like, oh, it's closer to me, but we may not be going the same place.
Yeah. And I think also, we added some patience in what we were going through, because I don't know how many people go through the same things. I never heard many people going through this, but, we are learning how to work as a couple, how to work as a family with your 2 kids, how to live in the same house and also apart for a few months every time. So we are experiencing multiple things at the same time, and we're trying to navigate and find a balance. So I think that also makes it more complicated.
Whereas most people like grow as an individual, and then they have a partnership, and then they have time to grow together, and then at some point they have a kid, and then have more kids. We're doing all of those things at the same time, where we have like months where we're apart, and then we have months where we're together, and it's quite a swing from one to the other. And then we've got half the week, we've got 2 kids, so Vale's just jumped into going from being single to a mom of 2 kids. And then we have other times where it's just us together, and so it's nice that we get to experience all of those, but it's also a bit disorienting to like do that. And then I'm also, learning a lot of things in a bit of a career switch from public health to private dentistry, and so there's just so many things that we're working on at the same time that sometimes it is a bit of like shuffling of like, hey, you focus on one area and you really get it going well, and then this other ball that you're juggling drops, and so you have to kind of focus on that area, and you're going to backslide a bit on the spot that you just worked on. But it's important to focus on
the vision,
what the other person is doing right, rather than what they're not doing, and gratitude and perspective. And so I love you, Vale. Thanks for going on this crazy journey with me.
I love you so much. Thank you for loving me and believing in me.
It's my honor. Thanks for listening, whoever's listening.
Thank you, and maybe we will do another episode at some point. Who knows? Bye everyone.